Good morning. Just getting my camera set up here. It's Heather Smith with barrelracingtips.com, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Pistol's Progress. He is actually in the middle of a microcurrent therapy session, and I have my camera on a stand right now, but here in a couple minutes I might kind of take you around behind and show you how everything's hooked up. So I'm excited to be coming to you this morning, and today, actually just the other day on Monday, I went over and described the three main primary types of equine therapies that we depend on, and that our horses have really found a lot of benefit with. And so this therapy is something that I do before every ride because Pistol here has been off for a lot of months, and he has some old injuries, and so when I'm getting him ready to compete, I start way out ahead of time in advance, and I take a few minutes to do these therapies before we ride so that his body can just basically memorize more balanced, lengthened, and just have the ability to basically move in a way that's more healthy and correct and conducive to the powerful biomechanics that we eventually want on the barrel pattern. And so if you have a horse that has had some past injuries and restrictions in their body and stuff, it just does wonders to loosen things up before you ride so that they can really confirm moving in a way that, woo! That's what I call the unicorn stretch. So that's likely a result of the therapy, the microcurrent therapy he's receiving right now. So anyway, like I said, I will give you a little review of what everything looks like, how I have him hooked up behind. I'm actually doing a treatment on his hind end and primarily on his stifles. I noticed when I did his session on Monday, I started to do just a little bit of loping, and this month we're really focusing primarily on groundwork. Again, because he's been off for so long, we're just starting really gradual so that he can build some strength before he has the burden of packing me around. But I'm going to start riding him in July. But we're really, I was thinking of a lot of things that I wanted to offer you as I'm going forward with this, and one thing I wanted to mention is that it would be really difficult to try to do a groundwork program in a way that really benefits the horse's movement unless the horse had a really pretty advanced level of education. This is because, like, for example, I do not want to have to encourage my horse to keep going when I'm lunging them on a big circle. I want to be able to communicate with them out at a long distance away from me, because lots of repetitive small circles are not necessarily beneficial for their bodies. So my horse needs to respond to my communication when they're out. Like, I use a 22-foot line or even a 45-foot line, and I need to have really refined communication between them so I can ask them specifically what kind of adjustments to make with their body. And if I don't have that, then they're just going to be randomly going around, and I'm not going to be able to tweak and refine the little details of their movement unless we are really connected. And the other thing is that my horses, I've developed them to, it's kind of like a monkey see, monkey do, like a mirror me kind of a thing, where they mirror my body language. And this is something that applies under saddle. So just a second, the timer went off. I have to switch the setting on this. But I teach my horses to respond and mirror my body language. And so this applies on the ground or under saddle. So let's say that I've never actually taught Pistol to prance on purpose or anything, right? But if I was to sit in the saddle and get really straight and upright and just start posting the trot like this, I can promise you that he would mirror my body language and my energy, and if I just put a gentle feel on the reins, that he would mirror that movement and start doing it, like at least a little bit, even after not actually being taught to do that, because he's mirroring my body language. And so this applies online also, or when doing groundwork. So if I make sure that I am being and doing everything in my body that I want from his. So if I want him to engage his hind end, I know this probably sounds crazy if you haven't thought of it this way before, but I actually tuck my own pelvis forward. I engage my abdominals. I make sure that my posture and my upper body is correct. And I do everything in my body, even during groundwork, that I want him to do in his. So one of the things I noticed when I did his very first session is that when he goes to the left, he tends to tip his head to the outside just a little bit, which means if his head's going to the outside, chances are his ribs are coming in and he's probably overweighting that inside that front left foot, which is kind of a habit as far as how he moves. So what I really want to do is I'll use some energy in my stick and I'll just make some motions like up towards like lifting his belly. And I'll really connect with him mentally and then just kind of suggest that, because remember, these subtleties have meaning. So then when he makes a shift and he checks in with me and he yields his ribs to the outside and he gets that correct bend on the circle, then I'll relax and really smile and reward him. And, you know, depending on if he made like a really big breakthrough or did something really great that he'd been struggling with, I might stop him and give him a little rest break, you know. So the amount of reward I give is relative to like how big of a deal or how much they had been struggling or how much we had been working on something in specific. But other times I give just little micro releases, and that could be something as subtle as like just smiling and communicating with no words, just like, I'm pleased. You know, like they can feel that. Horses are masters of communication and they do not use words, remember? So anyway, that was one thing I was working on. Another thing, and I have chapters in both my exercises books with groundwork exercises, but there's one specifically, it's not even so much a groundwork exercise, but one in the first 51 where I talked about teaching our horses to go long and low, to lower their heads and really stretch over their top line. And this is not someplace that I stay long term, but it is something that I like to teach my horses because it's like the opposite of how most barrel horses move and spend a lot of time in kind of a tense, inverted posture, right? Which is really, really damaging to their feet, to their legs, to their whole bodies. It's hard on their minds, you name it. So we want to do as much of softening and relaxing and lengthening and stretching as we can to counteract that. And so I do teach my horses to be in this long and low position. And what I do when I first start my groundwork session is that I will ask Pistol to just go in this long and low position, and he seeks it out. I've never used, and I don't like to use any sort of mechanics to create this, this frame. It's just something it's like scan and capture training technique where I just set it up and wait. In the very beginning, I might just wait until they lower their head and sneeze, and then I'll stop and let them have a little rest break. And then pretty soon you'll find that they'll be like, is this what you want? And they'll be seeking out more of that comfort and that peace that you have given them for just stumbling upon what it is you wanted them to do. So anyway, Pistol is ready to graduate, you know, beyond the long and low, but I always start out with a little bit of long and low because it just helps him relax, and he'll usually blow out a couple of times. He's kind of being a camera hog. I'm kind of getting pushed away. So I'll start out this session with some long and low and wait for him to just blow out and just tell me that he's really relaxed. So just a second, I'm going to change that setting again. So I'll confirm that he's just really relaxed and free and fluid. And then what my goal is to really start asking him to keep that relaxation and that softness over the top line, but start moving in a way that is a little bit more rocked back, a little bit more gathered, with his withers and neck elevated a little bit more, but with his poll flexed so that the plane of the front of his nose is straight. And because what he really needs especially is to be a little less front-endy and to engage and utilize his hindquarters more. And so this is just stuff that we practice. Not only can it really help from a soundness perspective, because if you think about it, a horse that is always leaning on their front end or that is balanced and has habits of moving in ways that aren't healthy, they're going to create unnatural, uneven amounts of wear and tear in their bodies. But that way of moving is not really conducive to like amazing barrel runs either, right? So that's what we're working toward, and I basically ask him to, I might just slow my energy down a little bit, and I might rock and exaggerate my posture, how I want him to be, and then I'll just kind of wait for him to find it. And he might kind of just find that position I want like by accident, and then I'll just give him a big reward for it. And then it doesn't take long at all for him to be like, oh, I mean, they seek it out, and that's where they want to be more and more like full time. So that's what I'm working on with him, making sure when he goes to the left that he's mentally connected, that he has a nice natural bend to his body, that his head isn't tipped to the outside. And I want you to keep in mind too that getting the correct form in their body has everything to do with where their mind is at. I would never be able to create that correct form by bumping his face and getting really rough. Thought we had another stretch coming. Which would actually, even if they did yield and learn to carry themselves like this, usually you'll see in their eyes that they look stressed, or they're going to be staring off in the other direction, because that's exactly where they want to be because of how we're asking them to move. But I want to have a connection where like the best place to be is with me, and that's why I don't really care to have a round pen or anything with walls around it, because I want distractions. And I want to develop such a communication level with my horse that nothing can compete for what we have. And so, like I said, that's what I'm aiming for with him, is to improve his positive flexion, especially going to the left. And it's not bad, but there's room for improvement. And then I always start off with a little bit of relaxing long and low, but what we're really working toward is moving with like lots of power, not lethargically, but also with a little more weight rocked back on his hind end and more elevation through his withers. And the reason I'm able to do all of this is because I have a really advanced, refined level of communication where I can just make suggestions with my body, even at a distance when he's out at the end of the 22 or the 45-foot line. And I make these suggestions, and then I just set it up and wait, and then I reward him when he makes an improvement or a positive change. And I'm going to be following, as far as how many minutes I walk, trot, and lope, and so forth, I'm going to be following, let me just grab the books here. So I'm going to start following the conditioning schedules in the next 50. And he's probably not going to be walking, trotting, loping. And again, I'm doing this first month with him on the ground. He's probably not going to be walking, trotting, loping the full minutes in the beginning of the 3-month programs in, I think it's exercise 42. But what that does is that it allows me those few seconds and minutes of reward time for him. But it just helps me really stay on track. And then I enter the amount of minutes. I create a program in the EquiTrack app on my phone. So that really keeps me on track. And then the long and low exercise, which is actually a ridden exercise, but everything in it applies to what we do on the ground, is in the first 51. And I just wanted to show you what it might look like under saddle. That's pistol. And then in both books, there is a chapter on groundwork exercises. And there's actually one in the next 50 that's called Better Biomechanics, where I talked about how this was really the secret to rehabilitating.com from his navicular issues. Again, this is all created through just quality horsemanship and no mechanics. So I hope this has been helpful. Let me just catch up on some comments. Yeah, he is really relaxed. Let me just turn that alarm off. So he's standing here in the barn. He's not tied. So it's they get into a routine, and this is kind of like their relaxing therapy area where we saddle and everything. We actually have an area that was designed to be a wash rack, and that's kind of our therapy area. But we have another place here where we have some rubber mats with pads under them. Oh, we got another some more processing here. But we really very rarely tie these guys when they're standing here getting their therapy. There's many times when I actually have to run in the house for something and I just leave these guys ground tied. But again, that goes back to teaching our horses responsibility, which is responsibility for stay where you're put and don't leave until you have further instructions. So, but that applies on the barrel pattern. When we're lunging them in a circles, like I said, I don't want to have to keep encouraging my horse to go. That's their responsibility once I ask them to go a certain speed. I might have a walk level of energy in my body, but I am not going to use my stick or string or anything to basically pedal for them. Like when I ask them to go, it's their responsibility to keep going until I make another suggestion. And then, like I said, if your horse isn't really mentally connected, if you don't have a pretty advanced, if the communication hasn't been developed to be pretty advanced, it would be really difficult to do groundwork in a way that is really therapeutic and beneficial to their body, because it's just going to be kind of rough. Like, I also do not want my horse to be putting pressure on the line that I'm using, because if they are, then they're going to be creating that resistance and tension embrace. It's going to contribute to resistance, tension, embrace in their body. And basically, when they are putting pressure on the end of the line, it's an indicator that they're somewhere else or want to be somewhere else, and they're not mentally connected with me. So I want them to be able to circle around me with slack in the line without me having to repetitively have to ask them to go forward. So those are some of the prerequisites for really doing groundwork in a way that doesn't just condition them, but really can be part of their therapy. So there's some breeze coming in, and now I'm just thinking I need to get some earbuds with the microphone. So I apologize in advance if there ended up being some wind noise on this video. But yeah, he is very relaxed, and that's one of the benefits of doing so much of this therapy, is that it feels good and it's relaxing. And I think spending a decent amount of time doing things that are relaxing is important for performance horses, especially time-speed events, because it is intense and it is stressful, and if we're not doing enough to offset that, then the tension and stress is going to keep growing and growing and growing until we really start having some serious negative side effects and having it affect their well-being and our performance ultimately. So this is just so good for their body and their minds. So anyway, that's what I have for you today, and we'll see. He's done with his therapy. I'm going to do his stretches. I'm going to boot him up, and I'm going to go out and do about 20-25 minute groundwork session. So I'll be back Friday morning, and I'll report in on how that went and how my goals are shifting as we go forward. So thank you so much again for joining me, and I would love to have you again Friday morning. We'll see you then. Thanks.